Working with a true expert is an experience unlike any other, knowing they have the knowledge, experience, adaptability, and judgment to serve you and those you love is something special. As a trusted guide through the most important times in my clients' lives, I have realized that these experts are all around us and I want to know more. I'm Brandon Ayers, and I've searched near and far for the people I consider to be experts in their field, interest, or hobby. As it turns out, they're just like us. I've invited one of them here today to join me as we take a deep dive into what places them among the true, everyday experts. Welcome to Everyday Experts with Brandon Ayers. I am Brandon Ayers. I am excited to have a very, very special guest with us today, Mr. Eric Mesko. He's a financial advisor with Mooney Lyons. You've been in the business, I know, about 20 years. What I really like about Eric is that he and I see the world the same way. Kind of, you treat people the right way, do good work, give solid advice, and you're taken care of in the long run. So I really appreciate that about him, and I'm really looking forward to getting to hear from him about some important things going on in the modern world here today. But first, our first segment is called Got a Second, where I knock on your door and just small talk a little bit. And I know one thing about Eric, big into fantasy football. Back in the day, you'd do like the hand box score calculations, right?
Yeah,
back in the
I'm
day.
that old where before computers came around, we had to wait for the newspaper to come out to tabulate all your scores. And
Yeah.
so now everybody knows how old I am.
Yeah, and now you can't now your team doesn't win as much as it used to when you were hand
Right,
the scores.
exactly.
Yeah.
That is the problem.
Yeah, but last week I had something that's never happened to me. I wanted to ask if it ever happened to you. I had my whole bench was on bye. Like I had no options on what to do in my roster. Have you ever been in anything like that?
No, never
No.
been in.
Do you intentionally try and avoid it? Or?
I do. I try to.
Okay,
avoid
so
it.
you're a bye week guy.
Yeah.
Like when you're drafting, you avoid the bye weeks.
Yes.
Because I figured I'll just have one bad week and then I'll be good the rest of the weeks.
That's not a bad way to go about it. Yeah.
Okay,
But
rather
if
than-
you want to go undefeated, it's tough.
Well, see, there's where you set the wrong. If you just one loss will win you the league.
True.
You know,
very
undefeated, chasing perfection is what gets in the way. We're going to talk about that.
Very
Just
true.
like investing.
Maybe-
That's a good. Let's start there. Let's use that as a divine transition. So I know some people, when it comes to investing, they're looking like for the perfect returns. They want to buy at the perfect time, sell at the perfect time, make the perfect decision, buy Apple right away in whatever year it would have been to be perfect to buy Apple, and the fear of missing out on that perfection stops them from doing really anything because they overanalyze. It's kind of are always churning. Do you see anything like that or?
Oh, absolutely. So, people ask me, like, when's the perfect time to do this? When's the perfect time to invest in that or to sell that? And really it ultimately comes down to you need a financial plan in place, and investing your money is part of that plan, and we need a diverse portfolio. And if I was to try to pick the perfect time to buy and sell investments, we'd kind of let other things fall down the wayside. And if anybody tells you they know what's going to happen in the market, they're lying to you. So run away. I never know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. I know what we could do long-term, and let's just get the plan in place and not worry about trying to be perfect.
So how do you work on that, like as far as resetting expectations when somebody comes in and they've just been paralyzed about doing anything because they want to be perfect?
Well, education is really the key to helping people work through some of these things that are stopping them from making the right decisions. And if you explain how the market works and that time is on your side, and historically we know what's going to happen, and if we do the right things now, we're going to end up in the right place, that really helps people, and especially visual people. If I can show them some graphs that illustrate this over what happened over time, it usually helps people get past those over-analysis paralysis.
Right. Okay. Now, one thing, kind of speaking of time, that we haven't had to deal with in a long time that we're kind of dealing with now is inflation. You know, for about 40 years there, it was kind of something you talked about, but it wasn't like you were really, really feeling from week to week. But I'm sure you get a lot of questions about that from clients now about inflation. How do you handle those kind of conversations?
Well, so inflation, what is inflation? It's the cost of goods and services over a period of time, and right now we're at a 40-year high of inflation, right? So again, I do remember gas lines back in the 70s. I don't think anybody in this room probably remembers that. So what happened was the supply and demand for gas got to a point where it was so expensive that people were standing in lines because it just wasn't there. And it's kind of what's happening now. COVID shut down the globe, really, for a certain period of time, and it really crunched our supply chain in a bunch of industries. And now what we're seeing is that supply and demand, right? So we don't have a lot of goods and services out there, and people still need it. And so what happens is the cost of everything goes up. So when we talk about that and we talk about what happens and how you work through that, being really conscious with your budget, right? And, and just making sure you're doing the right things to get us through this time, because it is temporary. Once we get people back to work, once we get our supply chains back up and running, then inflation will come back down for us.
And that's been kind of one thing. You talk about, the supply and demand. The demand side of things is kind of surprising to me, because I think it's people's mentality sometimes when there's a shortage or it's not available. It kind of creates like the run mentality, like old runs on banks back in the day of, well, I need to get this now, so now I'm going to pay more. I'm going to go off the market to find somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of cycles through. It's kind of interesting how human beings in kind of the mob mentality mindset can create that kind of little bit of panic, a little bit of irrational behavior. Where I remember being COVID when toilet paper started to go off the shelves, and some psychologists actually said it's because toilet paper is the biggest thing on the shelf, so it's easy to see when it's missing versus like a can of soup. So it's the first thing that we start to panic when we see, oh, there's only 2 left versus cans of soup. It's harder to spot that. So the run mentality started quicker on those things. I always kind of find that fascinating of how people, whether it's with like baby formula or anything else, just seeing an empty shelf once or seeing a little bit of a sparse shelf just can shape a behavior for a really, really long time, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. And you see that in all walks of life, and specifically when social media gets involved, and now it's easier for people to get all that information and have those feelings, psychological feelings that run with that, and make you make those decisions, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think people kind of in the emotional thing, like the thing that almost everybody knows about investing, you buy low and you sell high. But emotionally, people actually often do the exact opposite with that. I actually heard a thing today that if during the Super Bowl, Matt Damon was in a commercial for cryptocurrency, and if you would have bought whatever crypto that they were talking about the day of that commercial, today you'd be down 70%. And so talk about like buying high, like that's a good trigger. If you see something for a stock or whatever on a Super Bowl commercial, you're probably buying the peak, right? You're probably not the first person that's taking advantage of an opportunity. But the question kind of becomes, why do people kind of make those mistakes? Everybody knows buy low, sell high, but when it comes to the moment, the market that dips a bit, and now they want to sell, what do you think makes them do that? Or what do you kind of deal with?
Well, if you're looking at your investment account, your balance is going down, you have an emotional response to that. You worked hard for that money. You made that money, and you're hoping that's going to be there for when you retire. And as you watch what's happened this year specifically, when the markets are, the NASDAQ's down over 30%, and, the S&P and Dow is, working in the mid-20s, your accounts are low. Mm-hmm. And when you see that and what that money really means to you, you have emotional response to that. And, we say everybody knows that, you should buy low and sell high, but that's just a saying. I don't know that everybody really knows it, right? Everybody doesn't really know the fundamentals behind that. But emotionally, we know, hey, I got to stop losing money and I got to get off this ride. And they don't realize that that's probably one of the worst decisions they'll ever make in their lives.
Yeah, I've read in the past, I don't know if it's true with this current dip that we're going through, but in the past, there's about 10 days in the market when people make most of their returns, and most of them, of course, follow the dip. And if you miss those 10 days, and I think it's over a decade time, if you miss most of those 10 days or whatever the number is, 30 days, whatever it might be, you've lost 90% of your returns. You're sitting at like a CD rate after that if you've missed time. Because people, I'll just take it out now, and then when it dips, I'll buy back in at the low. That's what they think they're going to do. They're going to time the market or whatever it is. But you really, like you said earlier, can't time it. You just don't know.
You can't time it. The biggest opportunity loss in the stock market is if you're not invested at the time it goes up on those huge days, right?
Yep.
So we're always going to go up and down in the stock market. As long as we don't make any rash decisions and we have time on our side, we're going to be in a really good spot. But if we're not invested during those big times, that's when we really lose the opportunity.
So, like for me, I'm 39. I got time on my side. I can ride this dip. I don't have to turn my investment account into income next year, right? But what if I was, 79 or 59 or 69, whatever it might be, instead of 39? How do you kind of, what shifts do you make as people get closer to needing to turn when they don't have that time that you've mentioned a couple times?
Yeah, sure. So as time doesn't become your friend any longer, a typical situation is where we need to be a lot more conservative, right? We don't, if we lose money, we don't have time to make it back, right? And that's why historically in the stock market, that's our friend. Time is our friend. If we're in our 70s, we don't have that time necessarily to make up those losses, so we have to be in a much more conservative portfolio allocation, right? Now everybody's on an individual basis, and I do have some people in their 70s that have money in the stock market, but their overall portfolio is still, we know where they're going to be okay the rest of their life.
They got a good safety net.
Yeah,
they're just having some fun with the other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I always think of like the old tightrope walking between the two skyscraper type of things. If there's no net beneath you, you're gonna really take each step really carefully.
Yeah.
But if you have a net that works, like you might try backflipping across or something. If you have that net, you can have some fun with the other stuff, knowing that that's there for you. Last thing I want to kind of touch on is something you mentioned to me a couple months ago now, when you were talking particularly with a client. I think it was that they had most of their money through their employer. They weren't really at a position to move money over to you at this point. But you talked about what you called like the heart-based compensation. Just doing the right thing for them, give them some solid pointers and some reassurance based on what they're doing. How do you handle situations like that where you're not going to get paid with money or commissions or things like that? What's kind of your worldview or your way to go there?
So my worldview, I guess, comes from my grandmother, who a pretty simple person, but she was a young woman, 14 years old during the Depression when her second parent passed away.
Oh, wow.
So she's seen some things, and and she knows what it means to save a penny, but she always thought that if you just treated people the right way, things would work out. You could work hard and treat people the right way, and it's all going to be fine. And so I kind of have taken that philosophy ever since I was 16 at my first job as a dishwasher. I just wanted to do my best, and I'll be the best dishwasher this place has, and things will work out for me, and I think they have, and I keep that philosophy going now. So when I run into somebody who I not necessarily can help them manage their money because either they don't have money or it is, tied up in an employer plan, which I can't help them with, I just help them make all the right decisions that they should be making, right? And I help talk about those things about having a diverse portfolio and not selling at the wrong time, and making sure they're looking long-term retirement. And as long as you keep doing that, I think it'll work out for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's hard to quantify, but I know my phone rings from people that I just kind of took care of, either without getting paid or getting paid very little. I actually had one the other day. It was from an old client of mine. I did a real estate closing, nothing really too special. And she was asked by her stepdaughter-in-law, if that makes any sense, that relation, about, because that stepdaughter-in-law's dad was sick, and they wanted somebody to get her. And so that turned into a big file for me. It was a big emergency plan with a lot of moving parts, and we were able to take care of them. But that was the seed for that was sowed years ago just by doing the right thing for somebody.
You're doing the right thing, and not only that you got paid in the future with a nice client
Yep.
because of what you did. But initially, you also got paid. You felt really good about yourself helping somebody and
Yep.
put them in the right place. They needed somebody to help them do that, and you were able to do that for them. And I feel like, that's a big part of why I do what I do.
That's good. I think that's one of the reasons we get along the way we do. Last thing I want to talk about here is I ask everybody same 3 questions. I call it the 3-peat. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and we'll get after your answers. So the first one, your favorite book to recommend to friends.
So I like to do a nonfiction and a fiction,
Okay.
and my nonfiction is Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point. I like how he analyzes what happens and how he can explain phenomena like the Beatles, right? So I really like Malcolm Gladwell. And on fiction, I like Stephen King, and I would highly recommend The Stand. I think, particularly now that kind of plays on what happened with the pandemic, but you get an insight on how people think and how they react to situations in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are 2 good books. Second question, what's your go-to stand at the farmer's market?
I would go for the apples.
Apples.
I'm a big apple guy, so.
Are we talking Fuji's, Galas, Honeycrisps? What are we getting into?
I like a little sour in there, but
okay.
A nice sweet Red Delicious is also good. So I'm pretty, I'm open to all apples.
So this being around Halloween time, I've had some caramel apples in my diet the past couple weeks, and I've discovered something. I think caramel apples are infinitely better when you cut them up and don't just eat them off the stick. Cut them into slices, because then the caramel distribution is more even versus you get done with the caramel, now you have this awkward apple on a stick.
Yeah.
And then last night, actually, my wife brought one home, and it was sour. So the sweet caramel with the little sour kick from the apple was probably the best bites of caramel apple I ever had.
Yeah, you got to go
matching that with some
Granny
sour.
Smith, yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty good. So then last question. So we get done with this recording today. You check your phone. You can't do what you do. Not like you went to jail or anything. You just can't do it anymore. Like a king, just a creed. You can't do it anymore. So what are you doing? What business are you starting? How you going? How you paying the bills? What are you doing?
So, all right. So I spent a lot of time in the restaurant business,
Okay.
and I think that has really taught me how to relate to people and quickly get to know them and get them to know me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would probably be the restaurant bar business.
Restaurant bar? Are you focusing on like Italian food? Or are you just doing like bar, pub food? What are you doing?
I like red wine, so
Okay.
It'd probably be a steakhouse.
Steakhouse.
Yeah.
Steakhouse. What are you gonna? Would you be like the, I don't know, 98 ounce something or other? You get your picture on the wall guy. Are you gonna do something like that?
No, we're gonna be more classy. Yeah.
Classier than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
White linens.
Yeah, white linens.
White linens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where would you? Just follow up. I'm curious now. How would you find like your chef?
Well, I'd sit with him and I'd work with him. I'm a pretty good cook myself. I spend time in the kitchen. So.
Did I just fire you? Would you be the chef?
No.
Okay,
I'm not,
okay.
I'm out of that game. So,
Okay.
But I'll hang with somebody, see what they could do, and see if they can be in.
Or would
my
you go to
kitchen.
like your favorite steakhouse and just go to the kitchen and just like write a check to get the guy, or how would you recruit him? How would you get the meeting?
No, I'd make some calls to people I know and say, who's out there, who's available. Yeah.
Now, kind of going like on the fantasy football side, would you go like with a young up and comer,
Well,
or young up and comer?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, you want the promise, the ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you, Eric, so much for taking the time to sit down with me. I really do appreciate it. You can find Eric at his phone number, 847-382-2600. That's the Mooney Lyons financial phone number, or at mooneylyons.com. That's MOONEYLYONS.com.
Perfect.
I almost got in the middle of that. It threw me off. But appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for listening. Be kind to each other. Adios.